Thank you, Jeff, for the nice introduction, and I'm delighted to be here. I've been an Audubon member and fan for many years, so it's particularly fulfilling for me to work with Jeff and Paige and others at Audubon on putting together this workshop, which I hope will help you feel more comfortable with this, what seems like a complex topic of planned giving. And my goal today is really to talk about it in a way that makes it simple for you, or simpler, and that sheds some light and gets you to think about your own situation as it relates to Audubon. So that's the hope for today. The agenda of what we're going to cover in the next hour is really what you would expect. We're going to talk about what it is. What is this thing called planned giving, which, by the way, you'll see and hear me many times during the hour use the term legacy giving. And I kind of use those terms, planned giving and legacy giving, somewhat interchangeably, because I think that every planned gift is part of one's legacy. So you'll see that I kind of go back and forth. We'll talk about what's going on in the planned giving arena around the country these days. I'll look at and explain a little bit about why many donors do go forward with a planned gift, what are their motivations, and what gets in the way. What are the things that cause people not to move forward with a planned gift? We'll go through the steps in the process, talk a little bit about the role of other professional advisors on this journey, and go over the types of assets that are most commonly used and the types of gift structures or vehicles that are most commonly used for planned giving. And then at the end, we'll pose some questions to ask if this is something you would consider, which is kind of where we'll end up. Hopefully we'll have some questions during the presentation, which Paige can float for me if you put things in the Q&A or the chat. And we'll also have time at the end, I'm sure, for some questions. So here's our not really a definition page, because there isn't one definition for planned giving, but this is something I like to do, which is really to say that these are some characteristics of planned giving. And also I want to mention that you can plan for an outright gift as well. Planning is something that is smart if you're making any major gift. Today, we're really going to focus on the future gifts, the legacy gifts, but the term planning can be a little bit of a misnomer. So these are some characteristics that define or help to illustrate planned giving. Certainly, it is a different matter usually than an outright gift. It usually comes from your assets or your accumulated assets rather than your annual income. Most people have to consider their total financial situation when they're considering a planned gift. And that's why other advisors are sometimes involved in that decision. Often planned gifts are linked to endowment funds at nonprofits, and endowed funds are an important resource for every organization to provide them with perpetual income over time. So the idea of a legacy gift fueling endowments is something that we see often, although not exclusively. And another characteristic is the most important one, I think, which is when we make a planned gift, we're putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is something that reflects how I want to be remembered. This is an important factor in how I hope people will think of me when I'm no longer here. So let's move on. So in planned giving, it used to be that the vast majority of planned gifts organizations didn't really know about. They had, and it still happens, they had a surprise phone call that somebody left money in their will, And so it was not, these were not necessarily donors that the organization knew or realized was that that donor was planning to do something important for the organization. What we're seeing in trends, and this is related to studies that have been done over the last few years. In fact, there was a study done in 2019, that a national study that says that the average age for people writing their first will is 44. And I think that was a little bit of a surprise to me, but more interesting is that the first time people write a planned gift into their plans, the average age is 53. So it's not the 75 and 85-year-old donor necessarily that's only thinking about planned giving, which is what we kind of assumed in the past. So people are starting younger to do their planning and to also consider their charitable legacy. Also, I would say it's not your father's or grandfather's philanthropy anymore. And what I mean by that is that more people who are making major gifts and planned gifts are doing it and driven by their own personal passion rather than the traditions of their family. That those gifts certainly still happen, gifts to institutions that our parents supported or our grandparents certainly still happen. But more and more we're seeing younger people, and we're seeing them get in touch with their own passions to drive their giving. Also, the planned gift average size is more modest than you might think. There are still some what we call mega gifts, multi-million-dollar gifts that are happening to lucky institutions, but there are also many more modest gifts, and those are incredibly meaningful. Another trend is the growth in using retirement funds or life insurance as a beneficiary designation to make a planned gift. So again, in the past, this was sort of not happening frequently. It was pretty much a provision in anyone's will or trust that was driving the planned gift. And now today, many more people are using their retirement funds because they've accumulated those funds and may feel that that's a great way to make a charitable gift. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. The other thing, the last thing that we are seeing a lot of, and it's a great thing, is what we call a blended gift. So what do we mean by a blended gift? Basically, it means that you can make a difference now and you can make a difference later. In other words, so some people feel that it's one or the other. I either make gifts during my lifetime or I make a gift at my death. And in fact, many organizations, and I'm sure Audubon as well, are talking with donors about, what can you do during your lifetime to support us, which is wonderful. And how do we supplement that with a future gift? So the benefit of that is that donors get to really see the impact of their giving during their lifetime. I will apologize because you'll hear me sniffling. I was telling Jeff and Paige before you came on that I have some serious allergies going on. So great for the trees, great for the flowers, not so great for my speaking voice. So I apologize. So I want to mention what some of the key motivations are for donors who are making planned gifts. And clearly chief among them is going to be the belief and trust in the organization. We want to know that the organization, or the cause that the organization is addressing more appropriately, is so important to us, and we believe in it. We believe in its impact. We believe in the longevity of the organization. We have confidence that it's a strong organization that's going to be here in the future. So that is top of mind when we talk with people about considering a planned gift, is that high level of belief in the mission and a high level of trust. Other people say, I'm going to make a planned gift because I can't take it with me. I've been fortunate in my lifetime. I'm doing okay. It's not going to come with me when I die. And I don't really want Uncle Sam to have the full benefit of what I've accumulated during my lifetime. So that can be a motivation. Many people also in this category of plan givers don't have children, or they're fortunate and have children that have done well on their own and they're in good shape, or they just feel their kids have enough and they're not as interested in leaving all of their accumulated wealth to their children. What we do see is that a motivation recently is not as much about taxes as you might think, or tax avoidance. So that may play in some cases for people with extreme wealth. But because the estate tax threshold is so high these days in this country, it's definitely not the motivator for most givers. And lastly, you are in this to create your own legacy. You have a desire to give back, and you know that you can give more at your death than you could during your lifetime. So those are all motivations. Well, what are the obstacles? What are the things that get in the way? For most people, and again, this is based on surveys and research throughout the US, not just here in Rhode Island, many people cite these reasons. They say that they don't think that their gift will make a difference. They want to make sure, or they want to believe that they're going to make an impact with any major gift or planned gift, and they just don't think that their gift is large enough to make a difference. Some people are confused about the options and the different vehicles. And again, today we're hoping to clear up any confusion that you may have about different options and vehicles. But it seems confusing at first, so we're going to simplify it. Other people will tell us and cite in surveys that they just aren't sure if they have enough to take care of both themselves, their heirs, and charity. And obviously, I didn't say this, but one has to make sure that one retains enough of their assets to take care of themselves as a priority, and then make a decision about what you think is appropriate to leave to your heirs, and then certainly to consider the impact that you can have with a charitable provision. Some people say that they just don't want to commit. They don't feel that they want to be in the spotlight. And contrary to popular belief, most of the donors I've worked with over my career are not looking for a lot of recognition. They do not want their name in neon lights. They want to be pretty low key and a little bit under the radar. And so concern about privacy can be a factor, as well as the fact that there's a fear that they're committing. And one counter to that is that many of the planned gifts we're going to talk about today are not permanent. In other words, they're not irrevocable. You can change them. You could make a decision to make a planned gift or a legacy gift, and in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, you can change that provision. It's not permanent. It's not fixed in stone. Probably the biggest obstacle that I've encountered is that setting up a legacy gift or a planned gift is simply not a priority in the general scheme of life. We're all very busy and people talk about it. Sometimes they think about it, but there is a certain sense of inertia that keeps people from moving forward. So that's an important thing to just be aware of. So what do you have to do to move toward a decision about a legacy gift? These are just some of the steps. They're basic, but I think they're necessary steps before you would consider making a legacy gift. And they're probably pretty self-evident, but I just like to mention each of these things. So when you're thinking about making a legacy gift, you do need to have some sense of your assets. Where do I sit? And make a bit of an inventory. You need to ask that other question we talked about a minute ago, which is, how much do I need for myself? And how much do I want to provide for my family in terms of inheritance? Then you can kind of work your way to, hopefully, a figure of how much you feel comfortable giving and to whom. Now, we are talking about Audubon today, but most donors, many donors, have multiple at least 2, sometimes 3 charities that they make planned gifts to. But that's a process you have to go through in setting your own priorities. So how will I make the gift? We're going to talk about some of the different ways that you can do it. And then the timing is definitely important. So, again, I have to consider, do I want to give this gift during my lifetime or at death, or do I want to do some of both? And again, the advantage of starting your giving, even if it's perhaps a major gift to fund a specific program or a specific sanctuary, it may be that you would enjoy seeing how the gift is being put to work while you're here, and then adding to that support at your death, knowing that you're invested, you've been part of this process. Who else might you want to consult? Keep in mind that I'm mentioning all these different professionals, but you are the leader of the team. You're the captain. So the decision-making is yours. And no one of these individuals in your circle is more important than another one. You may want to consult with one of these folks. You may want to consult with more than one. But if you do, let's just clarify what the role of these various professional advisors is. So the financial planner comes into play when we're looking at this inventory of assets and making sure we're comfortable with that we have preserved enough of our assets to take care of ourselves and our inheritance. So that's a first step, is having that security. The estate attorney is kind of where you go when you're ready to make decisions, and you want to talk about how these gifts, if you're doing them, will fit into your overall estate plan. And that's an important piece. And if you do decide to add a charitable provision into your will or into a trust, if you have a trust, that's again where you would work with your attorney to draft that language. The accountant is someone you would consult around the tax benefits of the gift. The accountant may want to weigh in on the timing of the gift to help you avoid whatever additional tax burden there could be, both during your lifetime and also for your estate. So that is someone you might want to consult at that point. The philanthropy advisor, which is, as Jeff was saying in my intro, that's a little bit of what I'm working on now. And that role is really to help people clarify their charitable goals and objectives. Sometimes I work with individuals to help them understand both the vehicles they can use and also the organizations that most closely match what their own personal passions are. So that can be a philanthropic advisor that may be part of your team. It's totally based on your individual circumstances. But most importantly, and sometimes overlooked, I encourage you also to make sure you have a conversation with a representative from the organization. In this case, you would speak with Jeff about your thoughts about what you're considering, because you want to confirm that the organization is able to both accept the gift and manage the gift, including any restrictions you may want to put on the gift. You may also want to know from that person how you can expect to be recognized for your gift, and you may have preferences about that. So having a conversation with the representative, the development officer, or the executive director of the organization is important. And don't forget that you are allowed to change your mind. So you can work with Jeff or someone at a different organization to clarify what you think you'd like to do. It doesn't mean that you can never change your mind. So what assets are people primarily using to make legacy gifts and planned gifts? Chief among them probably are stocks and bonds, because whenever we have an asset that has appreciated in value over time, that is a wonderful way to make a charitable gift. And in the case of stocks, you will be avoiding capital gains taxes if you purchased something that has risen in value that would otherwise be taxed significantly if you were to sell it to use it for other purposes. So appreciated Stocks and bonds are great assets to give. Also, retirement plans or life insurance. Retirement plans, it seems that more and more people and more employers are encouraging the use of retirement plans and matching programs for retirement plans. So people, even people of modest means, are accumulating some resources inside their retirement plans, and these can be great ways to make charitable gifts at your death and even during your lifetime. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Real estate is another thing that can often have highly appreciated in value and grown in value. And it could be a case where you say, you know, I think I can use this as my major asset to plan a charitable gift. Also, people can give business interests. That could be a private company, shares in a private business or a partnership. Those are a little bit more complicated and require certain valuation protocols, but we definitely can see some major gifts that can flow from your interest in a business, as well as a simple gift coming from your bank account, where you would put the charity as a payable, they call it a payable on death account. So if you have money in the bank, you just work with the bank, just sign a form that says, if something happens to me, whatever's left in this account will flow to Audubon. And so those are some of the assets that we see used. In terms of the vehicles, I wanted to just make sure you understand that there are two broad categories of planned gifts. And one is the gifts that you set up now, but they don't happen until later. And we'll talk about both of them, bequests and beneficiary designations. And the second broad category are gifts that you give now, but they pay you back income for the rest of your life in many cases. So those are gifts that happen, you complete them now, but you are going to retain the income for a long period of time, and only upon your death or the death of whoever you name to get that income, then the charity will receive those assets. So those are the two broad categories. I'm going to go into more detail on each of these. And we're going to start with talking about the most simple option and then kind of move to the more complex or complicated options. And keep in mind that in this case, these beneficiary designations that I mentioned earlier, they're gifts that are going to come later, but you have to go through a little bit of a process to set them up. The process you go through is actually the simplest, I think, because it only requires you to communicate with the administrator where your retirement plan or IRA is residing. So for example, I have an IRA at Fidelity. I recently contacted Fidelity to fill out a form to direct that a portion of that plan, when I'm no longer here, is going to go to several charities. So that is a simple process, a simple form that you would fill out. There's no cost to you also to set up any of these kinds of designations. Life insurance is the same. Life insurance, you can make a charity payable on your death if you have a life insurance policy that you feel you no longer need. Maybe you purchased the policy when your children were younger, and now you feel like there's not really a need for that. And so you make the policy payable to Audubon upon your death. And I actually think Jeff may have a story about someone who did this for Audubon. And, you know, what kind of person would do this? Well, these kinds of gifts are excellent for people where their IRA or their retirement plan is really their largest asset. They have other assets that they're going to leave to their heirs or their kids, and they want to keep their giving meaningful but as simple as possible. So this would avoid income tax when the heirs would withdraw, or the donor themselves would withdraw from the plans. And yet it can be a wonderful gift, and it keeps things pretty simple. So Jeff, do you want to give me a chance to take a drink, and you'll tell a little story, I think, about a gift like this that Audubon has received?
Well, you've been doing such a great job. You should have a drink, take a break. Well, this just happened this past year, the beginning of the year. We had a donor. He was a business owner. He owned a garage, I believe, in Fall River, a mechanic garage. He was always a great supporter of our Raptor program. Unfortunately, he passed away, which is, was sad. And then months later, we got a check from New York Life for $60,000 that he had left to Audubon. So it was a huge surprise, and it went immediately into our Raptor care program because I had conversations with him and I knew that's one of his passions. So
that's terrific. And I'm sure that, they say that when people set up a gift like this, a planned gift, they live longer than they otherwise would have lived. So that's kind of an important thing. And we hope that he lived a good life. But I think it's wonderful, Jeff, that you had known him, you had talked with him, you knew that this was his passion. And then here you get this amazing gift that you're able to put exactly to the kind of purpose that he wanted to have as part of his legacy. So again, simple, but really impactful. So the second category of gifts you give later would be this broad category of bequests. And bequests, again, are changeable. They're not permanent. Just as you can contact your life insurance company or your retirement fund administrator and say, okay, rip up those instructions. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do something different. Similarly, with a bequest, you can change it at any time during your lifetime. So they're flexible in that way. In fact, bequests are the most common type of planned gift. About 70% of all planned gifts that people make come in the form of fairly simple bequests. And interestingly, since the beginning of COVID, the research says that there's been a 300% increase in charitable bequests. So I think we got a little bit challenged when COVID first started and as it dragged on, and forced in a way to think a little bit more about the fact that life is fragile, and who could have ever dreamed that we would face such a challenging time with this pandemic. And I guess if I could say the positive spin on that, or one positive benefit, is that more people really took a breath and said, okay, life is a little bit fragile. I may not be here forever. Let me really think about putting some charitable bequests in place just in case something happens. So that's been a good thing. I mean, you do need to use or go to your attorney to draft this language in your documents. And so a good time to think about this is if it's a time in your life when you're thinking about updating your will, and pretty much who you want to support, which organizations you want to support. The idea that you should revisit your will, the recommendation is probably at least every 5 years. So many people, write their will or their trust and they sign all the documents and that's it, they're done. And they think I'm all set. And funnily enough, 20 years can roll by really fast, and we may not have the same goals for our estate, both in terms of specific bequests or specific gifts to family members or friends, and also our charitable provisions. So, we really do encourage people to pull out that document off the shelf, give it a read every 5 years or so. And if you are going to do any updates, this is a great time to think about a charitable provision that you could add. And you can add it in one of 4 ways. You can add it as a specific dollar amount. You could put language in your will that simply says, upon my death, and each nonprofit, including Audubon, has the specific language you would use and give to your attorney. I leave $50,000 to Audubon for either unrestricted support or for a specific purpose. You could also use a percentage allocation, meaning you could say, in my will, I say, after all my other payments are made, and my funeral expenses are paid, and all the specific requests are paid, I set aside a percentage for XYZ charity. You can also name the charity as your residuary. What that means is what's left at the end. So in other words, I make some specific intentions or provisions, and then once those are paid out, the rest of whatever's left in my estate will flow to the charity. This is a wonderful way to do it. We never know what our final estate value will be. There's no way we can know that, but in good times, typically our investments grow over time, even if they're modest. So a residuary allocation to a charity can be a wonderful gift. And lastly, you can name a charity as a contingent beneficiary. So that would mean I name my sister, but if she's no longer alive, then I would have the same amount go to Audubon. And so a contingent beneficiary often kicks into place because, again, sometimes the people we think are going to be with us at the time of our death are no longer here. So let's switch to the other broad category, which are gifts that you give, but you get back in a way. And the first one is something called a charitable gift annuity. So you've probably heard of annuities. You've probably been asked to start annuities by your insurance broker. I certainly was many times. And an annuity is simply you put aside a certain amount of money to the company, the insurance company, or in this case, the charitable organization, and it guarantees payments back to you for your lifetime. You actually get an immediate tax deduction for what's called the remainder interest, or what that means is what they expect will be left in that account upon your death. And sometimes you get tax-free income as well. It depends on what type of asset you use to put into the annuity at the beginning. The annuities are irrevocable, meaning once you create the gift annuity, you cannot stop it. You can't take it back. You can't say, oh, I made a mistake. So you do need to be sure that this is something you would want to do. But you can do these in a fairly simple way. Again, one nice thing about a gift annuity with a charity is that you don't have to necessarily use an attorney to create an annuity. Many charities, including Audubon, can work with you directly. So you're really setting up almost a contract between you and Audubon, and it can pay back income either just for yourself or for your spouse or a sibling, one life. So one person gets back the annuity payments. You can have a two life, which would mean two people share the distribution or the annual payout. Or it can be deferred. You can set it up now, take the tax benefit, but it doesn't start making payments, let's say, for 5 years. So I've worked with people who've done this kind of pre-retirement. So they're setting up an expected flow of income after they retire by having a deferral. The minimum contribution to start an annuity varies, and the rates also vary. So the rates you would receive back for your payment. But just to give you an idea, in recent years, a 55-year-old would likely get a payout of 3.7%. If you're 65, it could be 4.2%, 75, 5.4%, and 85, 7.6%. So obviously, those are pretty good rates compared to what you might be earning, from a bank account or a CD or a low yield asset of some other type. And these are contracts, so this is guaranteed for life. This is really a great vehicle for people who are somewhat conservative. They have some assets, but they don't feel that they're in a position to start giving away assets outright. They need liquidity or they need income from that appreciated asset. And usually appreciated stock is used to fund the gift annuities. That's the most common thing that's used. They might range in size from a $10,000 annuity to a few $100,000 annuity, but it's a great vehicle for planning for retirement and a great gift to the charity. Another gift that you can make that is irrevocable, meaning once you set it up, you can't undo it, are charitable remainder trusts. And these typically are with larger size gifts, maybe gifts over 250,000 into a trust. They do, again, give you an immediate tax deduction for the amount that is expected to be left at the end. The minimum payout rate is 5%, but the rate can be variable in a uni trust, which is a trust that sets a percentage payout. So it could be 5, 6, 7% that you would make depending on what the value, the market value of the assets inside the trust are. Or you can do an annuity trust, which is a fixed payout, similar to the charitable gift annuity. This is also often used with appreciated real estate or appreciated stock or business interests. And it's kind of a better vehicle, it can be, for someone who wants more flexibility. They want to increase their income from what we would call low yield assets and avoid capital gains. So this is something that is certainly available, although less common than the other things we've talked about. Just want to quickly mention real estate. Real estate is obviously something many of us have. And for many of us, it's our most valuable asset. And there are people who have multiple homes, their primary home and perhaps a vacation home or land. So there are kind of two different ways to think about real estate as gifts. And one would be what we call a retained life estate. This is where you would take your home, it could be your personal residence or a vacation home, and you turn it over to Audubon, but you reserve the right to live in that property or use that property for your lifetime. You would be responsible for covering all the costs while you're living there. But again, you get a big tax deduction for the future interest or what is expected to be left in value after your death. And this is great for donors who need a large deduction. And also maybe they have a property that is they're not planning to pass on to the next generation. So it's I was going to say it's a little more complicated because the charity or Audubon in this case would need to evaluate whether they felt comfortable accepting the property. Is it going to be easy for them to either sell or use as part of their holdings in the future? So there's a lot of back and forth with this type of gift, but it can be a wonderful gift. And even as an outright gift, not a planned gift, a piece of real estate, usually when a charity receives it, they're going to try to sell it as soon as they can and then invest the proceeds into some type of investment account. However, in Audubon's case, obviously, since they're in the business of managing properties, you could have a conversation to see if it's a property that they may find useful or valuable within their portfolio. That's a conversation with them. So Jeff hinted at the beginning that I had a Maxwell Mays story. I had the good fortune to have met Max during his lifetime, and he had this beautiful property, almost 300 acres of pristine land. And if you're Audubon members out there, you may have been to this property, the Maxwell Mays Wildlife Sanctuary. I had the good fortune to go and tour the property with Max while he was alive, and when he was trying to decide what to do with this beautiful place that he cherished. And he knew that he wanted it to be preserved for conservation, for the birds, for the animals. And we had conversations about different ways that he could do that. We talked about different land trusts, we talked about other organizations, but ultimately he chose Audubon to leave this amazing gift. And the wonderful thing about it is that he also left a separate endowment fund that was managed at the Rhode Island Foundation where I was working, so that that endowment fund could kick off income every year to help cover the costs of maintaining the sanctuary. And to this day, it is one of the most wonderful, special places, I think, in the Audubon holdings and for us in Rhode Island to enjoy. So I was very fortunate to be part of that process. So what happens with the people that are making planned gifts? The fact is that 2/3 of donors who do make planned gift provisions or set things up in their estate plan do not tell the charity. They don't have, the charity doesn't have the benefit to know that this gift may be coming in the future. So it's unfortunate, but it's just the way it is. So I'm going to let Jeff tell you a little bit about the way Audubon recognizes people who are making planned gifts.
Sure. Well, Carol, I think we're going to have to name a trail for you at the Maze Refuge for all the work
That's
that
okay.
you did.
Not necessary.
So, as Carol said, exactly right. The very first major gift, legacy gift that we received when I began at Audubon, was from a woman who left a multi-million-dollar gift, quite frankly, and she had been given $25 a year for forever. And we never had a conversation with her. We didn't know what her passions were. We didn't know her interests. We knew that she went on bird walks with Al Hawks, our longtime director. So we created the Hawks Legacy Circles so we could have people have, raise conversations, as Carol's been mentioning. So we kind of can direct. I will be long gone when your gift comes in, and I want to be able to leave that information on with future staff. So it's an ability to focus your gift on your passions. It could be a refuge. It could be education. We love unrestricted gifts. There's a number of benefits. Lifetime membership in the organization. We do special programs. We took a hiatus for a couple of years, obviously with COVID, but it's just a way to recognize what I call visionary people who make Audubon possible. Without Bequests, Audubon would be a fraction of our size, and our impact would be a fraction of that.
Great. Well, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to end. And also, I would think, to begin to connect with other people who are like-minded. So for many organizations, the Legacy Society members do have an opportunity from time to time to get together, certainly pre-COVID when we did a lot more of that. And it's really lovely to connect with other people that share your passion and have made that same kind of commitment. So before I conclude with a couple of final slides, I want to just take a pause and ask Paige if there are any questions, and if not, we'll keep going.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carol. We have one, and if anyone else has a question, now is your chance to put it in the Q&A or the chat, or if you don't want to do that, we can also take you off mute and you can ask it verbally. We have someone who wants to know, how does the nonprofit guarantee the annuity?
Great question. So most organizations that will offer charitable gift annuities only do it if they are financially sound enough and stable enough to feel confident that even if the annuity outlives its, what we would call its predicted life. So it is possible that when you set up an annuity, this sounds a little morbid. I don't want to be morbid, but the charities we use actuarial tables, and as we are determining the rates and also the life expectancy of the donor. And it's very common that donors live longer than the actuarial tables say. So we do have to be prepared, if we're the charity, to know that we have reserve funds to cover any annuity, no matter how long the person lives. The donor might live to 104. And I've known some people who've lived to 104. So I think you have to have the confidence in the financial stability of the organization. At the Rhode Island Foundation, where we had a robust gift annuity program, and I think they partner with Audubon. So they would probably be backing any gift annuity that Audubon would write with a donor. And the Rhode Island Foundation, we did have a special reserve fund. We were sound financially in general with our endowments, but being so large, but we also had a special reserve fund. So that's what most charities do.
And I will say, yes, we do partner with the Rhode Island Foundation to do those annuities. So it would be set up through the foundation, but we would be the beneficiary.
Mm-hmm.
post after it settles.
Okay. Shall I move on?
Yeah, I think so. No more
Okay.
questions at the moment.
So I love to talk a little bit about what I call the big question, and that is, why am I talking with you about plan giving, and why is this a topic that is near and dear to me? Why am I passionate about plan giving? And what's interesting from my background is that when I went to college, I had no intention ever of working in a charitable organization as a fundraiser, which is what I ultimately did. My background is really in public health. I have a master's in public health with a focus on health education. And the first specialty area that I worked in was basically the issue area of death and dying. And these were the early days of hospice in this country, and I was involved in a lot of health education, patient education. I worked for a cancer center. So I did a lot of reading about death and dying. And one of my absolute favorite books is a book called The Denial of Death. It was written in 1974 by Ernest Becker. And this quote just has stayed with me all these years. And he says that what mankind fears is not so much extinction, but extinction with insignificance. We want to know that our life has somehow counted, if not for ourselves, then at least in the larger scheme of things, and that it has left a trace that has meaning. And to me, that's really the crux of this whole matter of plan giving. Little did I know that later in my professional career, I would help people discover and put in place their charitable legacy. But it's been incredibly important to me to remember this and to help people achieve this. So I think it's just powerful, and I love to share that quote with people when I talk about plan giving. So now, we're going to turn it a little bit back to you. And that is to ask yourself these questions at this point. I hope that I've made this a little more accessible, a little more simple for you to understand, but we are curious, and we're asking you to ask yourself, is there already a charitable provision in your documents? If yes, have you told Audubon about it? Would you like to talk with Jeff about it? He would love to talk with you. Keep in mind that all gifts are good gifts, and it doesn't matter the size. You have to think of your plan gift as an investment in the future of the world that you want to see happen. And in this case with Audubon, anything you're investing in Audubon is helping for it to become or continue to be the amazing organization that it is. So, would your gift matter? Yes, it will matter. And again, no matter the size. So think about what legacy means to you. And I hope this has given you some food for thought and maybe inspired you to take a next step with Audubon and other organizations that you love. And so that's where I'm going to conclude, and I'll let Jeff wrap up.